Alright, after an unexpected part we're back on track and it's finally time to touch down on Alabasta. Oda has been setting up the conflict in Alabasta this entire saga, but now he's really going to focus on introducing the key players, the ideas and themes, the actual location, everything about this grand sandy kingdom. We're covering the first 11 chapters packed to the brim with goodness, and a guy that people seem to think is pretty hot stuff. Sorry. Either way, it's time to start exploring the final island of the saga and see how Oda, quite literally this time, introduces us to the Grandeur of Alabasta. It's finally time for Alabasta. Finally time to see the land Vivi wants to save, and finally time to properly meet our main villain. We've been hearing everything about Alabasta from Vivi's perspective, that the country is being subverted by Crocodile and Baroque Works, but what is the experience of those living there who are unaware of what is happening behind the scenes? We, the audience, know that Crocodile is a villain, but how do the people see him? Well, for our first full non-silhouetted look at Crocodile, we get the everyman's perspective. Crocodile is a hero. He's seen as a guardian deity, the king of the desert. He is seen as a savior of the people. And more subtly, we see how Crocodile sees the people of Alabasta. He doesn't. Our very first real look at Crocodile, not obscured out of frame or hidden in darkness, we see him look down on the people of Alabasta. They are beneath him. There is little to differentiate the innocent civilians and the invading pirates in his eyes. They are all tools to him. Even the pirates, as hinted at the end of last chapter, are merely a way for him to keep up appearances as a warlord as he operates to subvert Alabasta from behind the scenes. Not that Crocodile is trying hard to appear to be a hero, he isn't exactly kind to the people. He tells them to, essentially, get out of the way or die. Just what you'd expect of someone who sees others as inconsequential. His heroic image is simply by virtue of being able to quickly arrive at the scene of and stop any potential pirate plundering faster than the kingdom can gather troops and address the issue. What Vivi says is true. To the average person, it doesn't matter who fends off pirates, all that matters is that the pirate threat is eliminated. We also have our first proper look at King Cobra. He shows his worth as a king in the fact that he's not upset that he or his men weren't able to stop the pirates, he's just happy that none of his citizens are hurt. Our only real comparison point for kings is Wapol, and already Cobra is showing that he cares more about the people under his rule. He is Vivi's father, and her values, at least at first glance, seem to have been shaped by his upbringing. The other thing to note is Crocodile's abilities. He gets stabbed through by several swords and is completely unaffected. In the aftermath of Crocodile's attack, the invading pirates are smothered in sand, and their leader, who we saw with a hand moments away from his face, is reduced to a dried out carcass, just like what we saw happen to that Rose back in Little Garden. With the aftermath of his attack, it doesn't look like Crocodile's powers are merely to do with dehydration, and that he truly may deserve his moniker of King of the Desert. His line, "I'm a different breed of pirate," confirms it. He sees everyone else as beneath him, and not without reason. Oda has created a truly nasty character. His power, his devil fruit ability, his status as warlord of the sea. He's not going to be like anyone Luffy and the crew have ever faced before. Not that Luffy knows or cares, he just really wants to kick Crocodile's butt. Vivi indirectly corrects him that, no, we're here to stop the rebellion, stop the war, etc, etc. But Luffy doesn't really understand all that complicated stuff, he just wants to punch the guy responsible. It'll be more than Crocodile's butt that needs kicking, as Vivi outlines all the rest of Baroque Works' officer agents will be gathering in Alabasta. She also confirms the Baroque Works organization structure, although pretty much everything she mentions we've already managed to extrapolate by Whiskey Peak, aside from the distinction between the millions and the billions. One other thing to note about the organization structure is that Mr. 2, the glamorous and excitable Bon Clay, doesn't have a female partner. Oh, and speak of the devil, here he is now. Bon Clay is very interesting for an officer agent. He's unlike any that we've seen so far. First, and most obviously, he uses his real name, something unthinkable for officer agents to do. Even his Baroque Works subordinates call him Mr. 2 Bon Clay, which defeats the aim of having an alias in the first place. He breaks the officer agent mold in several other ways. There's his aforementioned lack of a partner, he has a crew that seems to work with him, one that is fond of him, and he doesn't seem to look down on others. Bon Clay is friendly and he quickly becomes friends with the Straw Hats, and that isn't just him lying to them, he reaffirms that he's made a new friend to his own crew after he's parted ways. The other thing Bon Clay doesn't keep mysterious are his devil fruit abilities, his ability to transform into people whose faces he's touched, and also I think it's important to note that his unnecessarily violent way of copying Luffy's face also showed that he is quite the fighter. He was able to land a blow on Luffy without Luffy being able to react. Sure, Luffy wasn't on guard, but Bon Clay also wasn't actually trying to hurt him. His transformations are complete. It's not just the face he copies, but their bodies and voices. He even manages to copy Chopper in his hybrid form, which frankly makes me wonder if he's able to transform into animals, or if this is just because Chopper's eaten the human fruit. It's not relevant, it's just an interesting question. While Bon Clay is showing off his powers, he does show off that he's copied the appearance of King Cobra, which, with him being a member of Baroque Works, starts to clue us in to Crocodile's ultimate plan. By the time the crew have parted ways with him, we get confirmation that Bon Clay has copied the appearances of everyone on the Straw Hats crew aside from Vivi and Sanji, who was noticeably missing at the time. All that said though, we need to keep in mind in this arc that Bon Clay is not like the other Baroque Works agents. The stakes continue to rise as over a dozen Baroque Works ships are also sighted sailing towards Alabasta. It's not just the remainder of the officer agents that will have to be confronted in order to put an end to Crocodile's plan, but the rest of the organization, around 200 agents, all supposedly stronger than those bounty hunters at Whiskey Peak. Thankfully, with the knowledge of their adversaries' abilities, Zoro, of all people, comes up with a plan. In order to identify each other, just in case Bon Clay transforms into one of them, the crew, along with both Vivi and Karoo, tie a bandage around their arms. But to Luffy, these are more than just identifiers. These armbands are a sign of their fellowship. They are all in this together, striving towards a single goal, and Vivi takes an extra moment to appreciate that she has been accepted by the crew. It's been a long journey to get to this point, but Vivi and Karoo are fully accepted by everyone. One last thing before the crew land on sand, we see poor naive Chopper believing Usopp, which makes sense. He doesn't really know anything outside of Drum Island and medicine, so he's a sponge for any outside information, even if it's a bit of a stretch. But more than just believing Usopp's tall tales, we can see Chopper following his lead and taking his advice. Chopper has only just joined the crew, so while we're getting introduced to Alabasta, Chopper is also finding where in the crew dynamic he comfortably fits. As we cut away from the crew, we see another familiar face, and we confirm that, yes, as Little Garden implied, Smoker and Tashigi and their marines have arrived at Alabasta. Things are only getting more complicated, but not as complicated as the relatively new face we see. At the start of the final island of the Alabasta saga, Oda decides to introduce someone that will ultimately not have anything to do with it. Well, maybe a little bit, but we'll get to that. So, with almost no fanfare, we get introduced to the mysterious man hinted at back at Drum, Ace. Ace's introduction has a lot packed into it, so let's go through things one at a time, starting off with his appearance. First, and probably most noticeably, is the tattoo on his back. A giant tattoo of a manji. It's a manji. It's a Buddhist manji, okay? Not the other one. They do change the symbol in the future to avoid that sort of confusion, though. That's not the only obvious tattoo that he bears, though, as Oda very clearly shows off a tattoo with his arm spelling Ace, but there's an S that is crossed out, which I'm going to throw into the treasure chest without any further comment. Next up on the appearance front is the fact that he has a log pose on his wrist. The only person we've seen wearing a log pose like this is Nami, which she needs for navigation purposes. We can extrapolate from the fact that Ace is wearing one that he also does some navigating. Then are his initial mannerisms. He's a bit thoughtless, Luffy-like. He eats and then he falls asleep in his food, and then he wipes his mouth on a lady's dress, then he continues eating and then he falls asleep once more. He's just living his life without regard for people around him. So yeah, Luffy-like indeed. Then when Smoker enters the restaurant and words start getting exchanged, we learn even more. First and most importantly, Ace's full name is Portgas D. Ace. He shares that same D initial and thus shares the same mysterious Will of D. He is the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, and that tattoo on his back is the symbol of the Whitebeard Pirates, which is odd considering the face in the tattoo has a giant mustache, but okay, whatever. The reaction of the people hearing the name Whitebeard also goes to show that Whitebeard is clearly a pirate of some repute. Ace's title too is interesting. 2nd Division Commander. That means there's going to be, at minimum, a 1st Division Commander, if not more. Whitebeard's crew is not a simple pirate crew, but by the sounds of it, a large one consisting of multiple divisions. And finally, as Ace responds to Smoker, and he calls Luffy his kid brother, which is, and yes, I'm going to keep using this word, interesting, because aside from their D initial, they do not share a name. Luffy bursts in, literally, Smoker confronts him, and shenanigans ensue. Luffy and the others flee back to the Merry. Don't worry, I'll go back and cover it, but we're talking about Ace right now, and then we learn even more about Ace. Luffy confirms Ace is his big brother. He's 3 years older than Luffy and left the island, which we can assume is the island we first saw Luffy, 3 years earlier than Luffy did. Which, once more, raises the question, where was he when Shanks met Luffy? Also, it's implied that Ace hadn't eaten his devil fruit by the time he left the island, so Luffy had eaten the gum fruit first, though even with devil fruit powers, Ace apparently outclassed him. Luffy then also says that Ace is after the One Piece too. Except, once Ace comes aboard, he tells Luffy that he isn't. Ace wants to make Whitebeard king of the pirates. He is the greatest pirate Ace has ever known. Ace even goes so far as to invite Luffy and his crew to the Whitebeard crew, showing a surprising bit of authority, being able to just invite an entire pirate crew to join Whitebeard on his own. Luffy, of course, turns him down, and even acknowledges that they'll have to fight. Not in a, I hate you now way, but, oh well, I guess there can only be one, so we'll have to fight eventually, sort of way. And Ace takes it all in stride. He doesn't seem surprised or disappointed in Luffy's answers. The panel where he takes in Luffy's response, Ace has a gentle smile. Luffy is probably the same as he's ever been. We only see a short glimpse of the two together, but we can tell they've got a real bond. Luffy trusts Ace unwaveringly. When Ace tells Luffy to run and that he'll take care of the Marines, Luffy actually listens and runs without any hesitation. Ace clearly cares about Luffy a lot, even though Luffy is now a captain and has a sizable bounty, for how long he's been at sea at least. Ace worries about him. In Ace's final moments appearing in Alabasta, we get even more setup. First, Ace gives Luffy a piece of paper that will bring us together again, which of course I'm throwing straight into the chest. Then we get more information on Blackbeard, the pirate that stirred up trouble in Drum Island and who Ace is pursuing. He was a former subordinate of Ace in the 2nd Division, and he killed a fellow crewmate and fled. Ace is pursuing him out of a sense of responsibility as his commander. Finally, Ace leaves, riding a small ship, sailboard-looking thing. Either way, it's fueled by his flame fruit powers. As the promotion-hungry Baroque Works agents attempt to capture him, Ace does the only thing that materially affects the outcome of the Alabasta arc, and in a single explosive fire fist, tears apart 5 ships with 50 billions ranked agents aboard. Nami sews Ace's paper into Luffy's hat, and that is the last we see of him this arc. Really. With an introduction this detailed, you'd expect Ace to be an important part of Alabasta Saga, but nope, he's there for 3 chapters and then he disappears. But you know why it's important that Ace is introduced during the introduction to Alabasta? Because Oda needs to tell us that Alabasta is not the end. We're just getting started on the Grand Line. Ace called this place a backwater, somewhere out of the way. This isn't where the action is. Blackbeard, Whitebeard, Ace, there are more people, potentially stronger people than Crocodile, out there deeper into the Grand Line. We've been building to Alabasta, but Oda makes sure to remind us that there is more to come that he has planned. There is one more important reason that Ace was introduced here at the start of Alabasta though, and it's to do with devil fruits. We've seen Crocodile get struck with swords and seemingly have no effect, and we've seen Luffy go up against Smoker before and have no effect against him. There are devil fruits which are seemingly impervious to attack, different from Buggy's immunity to blades and Luffy's immunity to blows. If Luffy is going to fight Crocodile, how will he land a blow on him? Ace is here to provide a hint to that end. In the interaction between Ace and Smoker, Ace's fire powers cancelled out or counteracted Smoker's smoke powers. We also see how fire counteracted Mr. Three's wax powers. Devil fruit powers can be countered, even ones that seem to draw their powers from the elements. Crocodile's devil fruit powers seem immense, but perhaps there is something that can counteract them as well. Alright, that's all the Ace information I can handle, so now we go back to cover the non-Ace related happenings when the Straw Hats first made landfall. On the Baroque Works front, we see Mr. 3's ship, so he's made it safely back to Alabasta without bumping into Bon Clay. We also see Mr. 11, the agent that Smoker captured, still tied up aboard Smoker's ship, and via him we get a slightly more defined idea of what the Billions are. They are, essentially, the next in line to become number agents, relatively equal in strength to the higher numbered agents, Mr. 13 and Miss Friday notwithstanding. However, that rot at the heart of Baroque Works begins to show, the natural result of the disconnected and uncaring nature of the agents and the selfish promotion chasing displayed by Mr. 3. Crocodile, though he probably doesn't care, loses one of his top agents as the Billions take out Mr. 11 just for the chance to take his spot. We also learn where Smoker stands in this upcoming arc. The Warlords of the Sea ostensibly work with the world government, but to Smoker that doesn't mean a thing. Once a pirate, always a pirate. He doesn't trust Crocodile at all. In fact, he hates the 7 Warlords of the Sea. True to how he was in Loguetown, Smoker doesn't give a toss about what the higher-ups decree. Smoker is a marine to stop pirates. He'll disobey orders if he deems it necessary to stop a pirate threat. As the Straw Hats change clothes and gather supplies, heroic Karoo is sent off to King Cobra with a letter from Vivi containing the information she and Igaram gathered, along with a status update. We established another chopper skill, his sensitive nose, especially sensitive to perfume, a perfume that Nami has purchased. They board the Going Merry, flee the port and the Marines, and sail off to another part of Alabasta. Once again on the journey to their second landing point, as Vivi explains the journey the crew must take, again, Luffy pipes up and assumes that the plan is to beat up the rebel leader. But of course not. Vivi establishes that they will be heading there to negotiate and seek peace, to use her words to stop the rebellion. She does not want any bloodshed. It's interesting that this has happened twice now in the setup of the arc. Luffy is itching for a fight. He wants to beat up Crocodile and to beat up the rebel leader. Vivi doesn't even mention what to do about Crocodile and is purely focused on stopping the rebellion with words instead of violence. Oda has started and finished their touchdown in Alabasta with this sort of conversation. He's really making this theme clear at the start of the arc. The other theme that Oda has been making clear, one that is unique to Alabasta, is scarcity of resources. The arc starts off with the crew starving on their journey to get to Alabasta. They've run out of food. Then they touch down to gather supplies for their journey, and Vivi tells Karoo and Luffy that they need to conserve water. We haven't even been introduced to the inciting incident to the rebellion, but Oda is already hinting at what the underlying struggle may be. Oda is done setting the stage for the main players, the different people that will be shaping the outcome of this arc. We've seen Crocodile, we've established the goals for the crew, and we know that Smoker is going to be involved. Oda's hinted at the core theme of leadership in the form of conflict resolution and introduced the theme of resource scarcity. He's even teased us as to what is going to happen after Alabasta. So, what's next on his agenda? Well, Oda now has to introduce us to the underlying conflict of the arc, the root causes, and other important characters. And he starts off by introducing the rest of the officer agents. In a cafe in the middle of nowhere, introduced as Baroque Works headquarters, the Spiders Cafe welcomes the officer agents one by one. Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas, Mr. 2 Bon Clay, and then Mr. 1 who reveals his partner Miss Doublefinger, the proprietor of Spiders Cafe. As we should expect at this point, none of them appear to get along, aside from perhaps Miss Doublefinger, who seems surprisingly friendly, especially when compared to her violent partner, perhaps due to the fact that she's able to act as the friendly cafe owner up to this point. Mr. 3 is also here, but he keeps himself hidden. There are some nice hints of characterization. Bon Clay is looking forward to meeting Mr. 1 and his partner since he hasn't met them before, which is fitting for an officer agent who breaks the mold. He may even want to become their friend, though Mr. 1 dashes that idea immediately. Speaking of which, when Mr. 1 bursts in, despite Mr. 4 being shown as slow and Miss Merry Christmas is acting old, they are both immediately on guard and ready for a fight. They're upper ranks for a reason, and you shouldn't judge them by their appearance. The brief skirmish between Mr. 1 and Bon Clay also shows that the two appear pretty evenly matched, though Mr. 1 seems to be hiding some sort of ability that may have swung the odds in his favor. They all hop into a carriage and make their way to Rain Base to finally meet their mysterious boss, who we see awaiting their arrival. We also finally get some acknowledgement that Mr. 13 and Miss Friday never returned after getting beaten by Sanji. But of course, there are some other capable animals to act as their substitutes. They arrive at Rain Base in the city's largest casino, waiting to meet the boss, and finally Miss All Sunday walks in to introduce Mr. Zero. All of them recognize Crocodile and they all react very surprised, except for Mr. One, who seems to keep a rather cool head, but Crocodile shuts them up with a cold glare. Miss Doublefinger asks a pretty pertinent question. Crocodile is a well-known pirate associated with the world government, he's clearly rich. Why does he need Baroque Works? Because Crocodile wants power. And he uses a term that Don Krieg used back in the East Blue. He wants military might. Crocodile's true goal is obscured by a cutaway as he explains it to the officer agents, but we see their reactions, and most notable is Bon Clay. Such a thing actually exists in this kingdom. So there is a specific thing that can be found in Alabasta, something that Crocodile believes will grant him military might. Crocodile gives his officers their final written instructions, saying that the time has come for Alabasta to disappear. As they burn the instructions they've memorized, Crocodile announces the plan will begin the next morning. Once again, I'll note that Crocodile does not give any information than what he believes each officer agent requires. Their instructions are kept secret, even from one another. But before Crocodile can dismiss everyone, a battered and gaunt Mr. 3 shows up, having hitched a ride from the Spider's Cafe, and he immediately gets rid of the Straw Hat's biggest advantage, revealing that they are all still alive. Crocodile's tendency to not share information beyond what he deems necessary has come back to bite him, otherwise Mr. 2 could have acted. Speaking of, he doesn't seem too happy that they're Baroque Works' enemies, they are his friends after all. Crocodile shows off his ruthlessness, sucking the moisture out of Mr. 3 just like what we saw him do to the invading pirates, and then he drops him into a pit where the banana gators can consume him. Mr. 3 has, bluntly, saved Crocodile's plan from potential failure, but Crocodile doesn't care. There is no forgiveness, no second chances. We also get the tidbit of info that Mr. 3 was only ranked higher than Mr. 4 because he was ruthless and smart, but Mr. 4 is physically stronger. Crocodile has done his research though. He knows that Vivi is close with the leader of the rebels, and that the two meeting could end the rebellion and put a stop to Crocodile's plans. He doesn't underestimate the damage she could cause, which is smarter than a plan maker like Kuro. We also learn that members of Baroque Works are hidden within the members of the rebellion. As Oda taught us, they could be anywhere. As Crocodile dismisses the officer agents, we're left with only one advantage that the Straw Hats still have. They don't know that Sanji exists, and they think that Chopper is just a pet. Crocodile's plan is in motion, his instructions are all set, although Miss All Sunday knows about Sanji, and she clearly has not revealed that fact to Crocodile or the rest of the agents. She's mediated this meeting between the officer agents and Crocodile, yet once again, she seems to have her own agenda. Oda has finished introducing us to the core antagonists and their aims, some sort of thing that will give Crocodile military might that is hidden somewhere in Alabasta. So since the Straw Hats touched down, what have they been doing? They've left the Miri at Erumalu and have started their half-day trek to Yuba where the rebels are supposed to be, and it goes poorly. It starts off as soon as they get off the ship with a comedic interaction with the Kung Fu Dugons, resulting in the crew losing half of their rations in chopper-enabled negotiations, though Luffy seems to have gained an army of Kung Fu Jugon apprentices in return. They then lose 3 days of rations to evil herons who trick Luffy into thinking they're dying, then are attacked by a giant Sandora dragon, which gets dispatched and then eaten, who was chasing a camel, a ladies' man camel, who Nami calls eyelashes. There's a lot of wildlife, some friendly, some definitely not friendly, and then there's crazy cactuses. Chopper, they should be called crazy cacti, which, true to their name, make Luffy go a little bit loopy. When they all finally make it to Yuba, even the town is being ravaged by a sandstorm. Alabasta is terribly inhospitable. It's a desert teeming with danger, but perhaps the most destructive force being inflicted on Alabasta is the drought. And it's this 3-year drought that is the core of the conflict of Alabasta and the source of the rebellion. We see how Crocodile managed to begin the rebellion, having Baroque Works agents, the same one that we see kill Mr. 11, get themselves quote-unquote caught quote-unquote delivering dance powder to the king. Dance powder is a powder which causes artificial rain to occur in a specific area, but at the cost of stopping rain from happening in other areas because moisture from surrounding clouds is stolen. Crocodile framed the king by using dance powder to make rain occur in the capital where the king's palace was, having the people blame him for the drought occurring in the rest of Alabasta. Dance powder is an illegal substance, as deemed by the world government, and Crocodile, as well as staging the failed delivery, also hid dance powder within the palace itself. The lack of rain resulted in lack of food, the trust in the royal family was destroyed, and Alabasta's peace was destroyed. We saw how crazed some of the crew acted when they were running low on food just after a few days. Now imagine that for 3 years. Prosperous towns have been abandoned and destroyed, the lives of Vivi's people have been lost, all because of Crocodile's scheme. The three most hot-headed, upon hearing Vivi's story, get so fired up they just have to break something. They care, as do the rest of the crew, about Vivi, and they feel her pain, and Luffy once again looks like he's ready to fight. Oda really drives home how hard it must be as the Straw Hats make their journey to Yuba. How difficult Luffy finds it not to eat and drink until he is content, how they have to, even if only for a short while, act while having scarce resources. And as they make it to Yuba, we see the real human toll as Oda introduces us and the crew to Toto, previously quite large and jolly, who is now a withered version of his former self. A town that was meant to be a potential prosperous hope is covered in sand and desolate. Though Toto remains loyal to the king and trusts him, he has not given up hope, but the rest of the village have left for the rebellion. It is at this point that Oda introduces us to the final key players of this story, as we get a flashback of Vivi's past before the drought, and the two key players we properly get introduced to are the first two faces we see: Koza, Toto's son, and King Cobra. Finally, we get to really see what kind of king King Cobra is, and as we should expect of Vivi's father, he cares about the people. He listens to his subjects, he does what he can to ease their suffering, even if it means reducing his own standard of living. He's reasonable when his daughter gets in a fight with the young Koza, he doesn't blame Koza, he views it level-headedly, and oh my gosh, sorry, I have to interrupt Baby Karoo, he's so cute, how have I not noticed that before? Look at his dumb little face. Okay, sorry, I couldn't help it. Yeah. Cobra is also a loving father. He doesn't act as a king when it involves his daughter, sneaking around, making sure she's okay, beating up bandits who dared attack his daughter. He loves his kingdom and he does what he thinks is best for it. When he sees Vivi crying because she was worried about her friends getting hurt and Igaram expresses that he's concerned that Vivi's heart is too soft for the hardships of being a ruler, King Cobra thinks that her soft heart is good for Alabasta. He really is the opposite of Wapol. Koza, despite being a child, is shown as a very complementary character to Cobra. While Cobra is a bit more measured, older, wiser, Koza is very passionate, rash, and impulsive. But the two are the same in how they both want to protect those close to them. Cobra, the nation and its people, Koza, his village and his friends. Both want to protect Vivi, and both love the country, and when we see a young Koza leave to Yuba with his father, both want the country to grow. So with the information that Koza has available to him, it's no wonder that a young boy who would storm in front of the king and speak out for the sake of his village would now grow up to go against the king to, as far as he knows, save his country. Through Koza, Oda shows us two important things about the rebellion. It's not abstract, it's not faceless. These are people who have grown up in and love Alabasta. They legitimately think that this is their only recourse to save the country. They, as Vivi keeps saying, are not the villains here. That's why she must negotiate with them. These are people who were full of hope, people who previously trusted and respected the king, not people who were itching to rebel and finally found an opportunity. And it shows us how terribly evil Crocodile's plan is. It's hard to fathom the scale of this conflict, the breadth of Crocodile's plan. We can see Buggy blowing up a town, Krieg trying to take over Baradier, and even Arlong destroying villages. We can understand that immediate physical destruction. Crocodile's multi-year plan, it's abstract, stealing the rain, framing the king, fomenting a rebellion. We've been seeing the aftermath of the drought and we've caught hints of how difficult life must have been via the crew's half-day journey, but now we're seeing the real damage done to the kingdom. Crocodile has not just stolen the rain, he has stolen the hope of the people. He has turned a boy who loved his country, filled with hope to make Alabasta a better place, and twisted him into a tool for Alabasta's destruction. And we can assume that this is the same for many of those who have joined the rebellion. Oda is doing his best to help us fully understand Vivi's pain and the anger she feels towards Crocodile for what he has done to the country and the people she loves. As the rest of the crew rest, Luffy stays up with Toto. We've seen before that he's got a soft spot for old men brimming with passion and going against the odds, so Luffy does his best to assist in digging. He may not be doing it right, but he does what he can, and Luffy's persistence, it seems to pay off. We don't know exactly if it's thanks to the whole Luffy help dig, but Toto manages to find some water. It's not much, but Luffy is shaking in excitement and appreciation. He understands how valuable this water is. So it comes as a shock that 1 page later he stops moving, sits down and declares to everyone, "I quit." This whole time, everything has been riding on Vivi's shoulders. She's the only one that can resolve this conflict. She's the only one that has a hope of convincing the rebels to stop. She is the only one left to reveal Crocodile's plan. She can't let anyone die, whether they're part of the royal army or part of the rebels. They are her people. She has been singularly focused on this goal. Stop the fighting, don't let any of the people die. What she's feeling doesn't matter. She cannot get distracted. Her country is relying on her. When she saw Igaram blow up in front of her, she could only bite her lip and move forward. When she got captured by Mr. 3, if cutting off her own legs was the only path to keep going, then that's what she was determined to do. No matter the hardships, no matter the obstacle, Vivi just has to keep going. Her people must be saved. But Luffy can see past this singular obsession. He can't use a sword, he can't cook, he can't navigate, he can't lie, he can't cure the sick, he can't stop the rebels, he can't negotiate peace. There's only one thing that Luffy can do, the only thing he's ever really been good at doing. At Drum Island, Vivi explicitly called Luffy out, telling him he was a failure as a captain, that his impulsiveness would cost the lives of his crew, that he had to put the needs of his crew above his own impulsive emotions. Just as Vivi taught Luffy this lesson about leadership, Luffy, in an uncharacteristic moment of lucidity, has 2 lessons to teach Vivi. Just as Vivi called out Luffy's impulsiveness, Luffy calls out Vivi's naivety. Her sincere and honest hope that no one will die is unrealistic. The number of people involved, the foe that they're up against, it's a reality that Vivi will have to face, that people will have their lives put at risk, and some of those people will die. Then Luffy gives Vivi her second lesson. As Luffy refuses to move, Vivi tries to persuade him, tries to reason with him, but Luffy doesn't budge. Some things cannot be solved by words. Then in desperation, Vivi attempts to use force. She even manages to draw Luffy's blood, something that Luffy should be impervious to. But Vivi has never been good at using force to get her way, and it doesn't work here either. Vivi has the heart of a leader, one that loves and cares for her people, but she lacks the power to protect them. Even if Vivi manages to stop the rebels, the root of the conflict is still there, and he will not be reasoned with. Luffy has always known that he cannot do anything without his crew. When they were swallowed up by Laboon, what he said was that he needs them. They make up for what he lacks. Vivi too made up for something Luffy lacked. Her big heart, her diplomacy, it saved a member of his crew, and now he sees her as part of his fellowship. Vivi took a bullet to make sure that Nami received treatment. She got herself injured, all for the crew's sake. Now it's Luffy's time to do the same. The lesson that Luffy teaches Vivi is that she doesn't have to do it herself. The burden of leadership can be shared. That just because you're a leader, it doesn't mean you have to bear everything on your shoulders. The people around you, the people who care for you, they can make up for what you lack. More than that, they want to. Just as Luffy needs his crew for his journey to become Pirate King, Luffy and the crew can help Vivi achieve what she wants most. If Vivi lacks the power to take on Crocodile, then Luffy will bear that burden and make up the difference. After all, that is all Luffy can do. He can beat him. This is what Cobra saw in Vivi's relationship with Koza. With such friends to support her, the future of Alabasta looks promising indeed. Vivi's heart may be soft, but with people who care about her by her side, Cobra knows she'll be able to make it through. She doesn't have to handle everything alone. Vivi hasn't cried this entire saga, save for some comedic reactions. She has been as dry as the desert land she's trying to save. Just as Crocodile stole the rain from Alabasta, he also stole Vivi's ability to cry. So when this realization hits Vivi that she's not alone, that she has friends that are more than willing to make up where she falls short, to give her the power she needs to protect her people who are willing to put their lives on the line, not out of loyalty or obligation, Vivi finally cries. And just as Luffy helped Toto dig a hole to gather some water, he has dug to the heart of what Vivi needs and has finally given her the ability to cry again. Luffy has turned Vivi's I into a we. So with all his crew, all of Vivi's friends standing with him, Luffy asks, where do we find this crocodile? That's where we'll end this first Alabasta part, with Crocodile and Baroque Works putting his final plan into motion, and Luffy and the crew resolute in what they must do: defeat Crocodile. The crew have left the Merry to venture deep into the heart of the island, which is a bit of a first. Usually islands have been small, or the Straw Hats have had their adventures relatively close to where they landed. I guess Drum Island was an exception, but even then it didn't feel as expansive as Alabasta, where they're journeying on foot for days. We may as well take the opportunity ourselves, right, Merry? It's been a long journey getting here, so we should at least make landfall. Just over there looks like it'd work. We're finally here. We made it to Alabasta, Merry.